to eat again. We thought she was gone, and she's starting to eat again. So she had the biggest impact of any human being on my life because she refused to be a victim, and she refused to let me and my brother be victims. And that was really the key. And she made us do things that we didn't want to do. She reminds me of that Baltimore mother who went out and got her son off the streets. That would have been her. And it made a huge difference.
And when you say she refused to be a victim, I mean, you grew up in dire poverty in the inner city of Detroit.
Absolutely. Never had money for anything. But I'll tell you what really did work, books. Between the covers of those books, I could go any place, I could be anybody, I could do anything. And particularly as I read about people of great accomplishment, I began to realize that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you in life is you, not somebody else, and not the environment.
Okay. Your greatest strength in the race, I would argue, is also, some would argue, your greatest liability, and that is that you've never run for or held political office. How do you answer the experience question?
I simply say that experience can come from a variety of different places. There have been many people who've been groomed to believe that experience can only come in the political arena. But I've had a lot of experience, world experience, putting together teams to accomplish things that have never been done before with incredibly complex surgical procedures, putting together a national scholarship program. 9 out of 10 nonprofits fail. Ours not only has not failed, has thrived, is working in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. We're putting in reading rooms all over the country, affecting people's lives. I've had lots of corporate board experience, 18 years on Kellogg, 16 years on Costco, as well as other boards. So, you know, there's real life experience and there's politics. Politics, you know, there are some good people in the political arena, but I'm not sure that they actually, in many cases, understand real life.
All right. Let's talk about real policies and drill down into some of them. Here's what you say on your website about Russia. All options should remain on the table when dealing with international bullies such as President Putin. Dr. Carson, when you say all options, does that include the use of military force?
All options includes all options. That doesn't mean that that would be my first option. When we look at Russia and we look at Putin, we can realize that he has great ambitions. His ambitions have been thwarted of late because of falling oil prices. And we should take note of that and realize that the economic weapon is a tremendous one in his case. We have incredible natural resources in this country in terms of oil, in terms of natural gas. But we have energy exportation rules from the 70s when we had an energy crisis that need to be gotten rid of. So we can use that to make Europe and some of the other portions of the world more dependent on us, and that decreases his influence and his ability to expand.
But let me follow up. You say all options, all options. Under what circumstances would President Carson be willing to go to war with Russia? What are your red lines?
Well, I would obviously do that in consultation with very competent generals and people who are more knowledgeable in that area than I would be. But clearly, if the interest and the existence and the safety of the people of the United States was at stake, and that was the only way to protect them, of course I would do whatever was necessary.
Would you go to war over Ukraine?
No, I wouldn't go to war over Ukraine, but I would handle Ukraine in a very different way. You know, Ukraine was a nuclear-armed state. They gave up their weapons. And, you know, it was agreed that they would be protected if something happened with aggression. Have we lived up to that? Of course we have not. And what does that say to our other allies around the world? It's not a good sign.
One of the pillars of your economic program is a flat tax. How would that work?
Well, I like the idea of a proportional tax. That way you pay according to your ability. And I got that idea, quite frankly, from the Bible, tithing. You make $10 billion a year, you pay $1 billion. You make $10 a year, you pay $1. you get the same rights. That's pretty darn fair if you ask me. Now, some people say it's not fair because, you know, the poor people can't afford to pay that dollar. That's very condescending. You know, I grew up very poor. I've experienced every economic level. And I can tell you that poor people have pride too. And they don't want to be just taken care of. And also, if everybody is paying, it makes it very difficult for these politicians to come along and raise taxes. It's easy to raise it on 1% or 2% or 5%. It's very difficult to raise it on 100%.
But doctor, here is the problem with a flat tax in the real world. According to the Tax Policy Center, to raise the same amount of revenue we do now, the tax rate would have to be in the low to mid 20% range.
Wrong.
Low and middle income families would get a big tax hike, while wealthy families would actually get a big tax cut.
That's actually not, I don't agree with that assessment. Let me put it that way. Because I've been in contact with many economists, and in fact, if you eliminate the loopholes and the deductions, then you're really talking about a rate somewhere between 10 and 15%.
I got to tell you, the outside experts we talk to say you're talking in the 20s.
Let's have a battle of the experts.
Well, we'll have a battle of the, I mean, that's right. But for instance, you talk about low-income families. They don't, not only don't they pay, they actually get an earned income tax credit. Now you're going to have them paying 10 to 15% of whatever income they have, or 20% if my experts are right. I mean, isn't there a danger? I got to tell you, a lot of independent studies say the people who make out like bandits in this are the wealthy.
Well, bear in mind, Chris, this is part of an overall complex program, because it also involves reorienting the way that we do things in government, making the government run more like a business than this great inefficient behemoth that we have now. It involves, you know, utilizing our energy resources the right way. We can get an enormous amount of revenue from that. It involves a balanced budget. You know, by the time you put all those things in, it involves getting rid of all of these things that are fettering the economic engine, and revamping corporate taxes, and bringing in money that's overseas by giving a tax holiday. That's $2 trillion right there. I mean, there are a number of things involved in doing this.
Fair enough. We're beginning to run out of time, so I'm going to do something of a lightning round here. One of the things you say you're learning is not to be so inflammatory in the language that you use. But I want to ask you about some remarks you've made that you say that you stand by. You have compared our government today to Nazi Germany. Do you really believe that?
Well, a lot of people like to say that. But what I said is that in Nazi Germany, most of those people didn't believe in what Hitler was doing. But did they say anything? They did not. And that's what allowed things to progress to that point. We need to be willing to stand up and speak up for what we believe in.
But people oppose Barack Obama all the time.
There are a lot of people in our society who are afraid to say what they really mean, because they may get an IRS audit. People will call them names. Their job may be interfered with. This is not what America was supposed to be.
Okay, here's what you said about Obamacare.
Obamacare is really, I think, the worst thing that has happened in this nation since slavery. And it is, in a way, it is slavery.
The worst thing since slavery?
Well, you have to understand what I'm talking about. You know, Obamacare fundamentally changes the relationship between the people and the government. The government is supposed to respond to the will of the people, not dictate to the people what they are doing. And with this program, we're allowing that whole paradigm to be switched around.
Finally, in the area of these remarks, just this week, you said that the president must carry out a law passed by Congress, but you said he doesn't necessarily have to pass what you called a judicial law, which raises the question, do you believe that the president must observe a decision by the Supreme Court?
Well, what I said is that the president doesn't have to agree with it.
No, of course not. But does he have to enforce it?
Well, Dred Scott, a perfect example. You know, the Supreme Court came up with this, and Abraham Lincoln did not agree with it. Now, admittedly, it caused a lot of conflict and eventually led to a civil war, but we're in a better place because of it.
But does the president have to carry out a Supreme Court rule?
The way our Constitution is set up, the president or the executive branch is obligated to carry out the laws of the land. The laws of the land, according to our Constitution, are provided by the legislative branch.
But sir,
the laws of the land are not provided by the judiciary branch.
But sir, since Marbury v. Madison in 1803, we have lived under the principle of judicial review, which says if the Supreme Court says this is the law, this is constitutional, that the executive has to observe that.
And I have said this is an area that we need to discuss. We need to get into a discussion of this because it has changed from the original intent.
So you're saying this is an open question as far as you're concerned?
It is an open question. It needs to be discussed.
Finally, when people heard I was interviewing you this week, there was one question I got more than any other, and that was, does he really think he has a chance of being elected president? How do you answer that?
Well, I would answer it by saying my life has been so full of people telling me what I couldn't do that I would be more concerned if they told me I could do it. That's how I would answer it. You know, there's been a gazillion things that people say, no one's done that before. You can't do that. You know, in my surgical career, you know, when I joined ROTC, I joined late and I wanted to get to the top rank. They said, you can't do that. Did it. You know, they said, you can't start a scholarship program. There's a gazillion of them. It has excelled. You know, and it's not just me. You know, there's the ability to work with a lot of people to achieve what you need to achieve.
Dr. Carson, thank you. Thanks for coming in today. Always a pleasure to talk to you. We'll see you down the campaign trail.
Thank you, Chris.